Elva Enid Mullins was born on 22 January 1904 in Chelsea, West London. She was the eldest daughter of Sir John Ashley Mullins, a prosperous stockbroker who served as financial advisor to King George V, and Lady Evelyn Maud Adamson. From birth, Elva occupied a position of considerable social privilege, shaped by wealth, proximity to power, and entrenched aristocratic custom. The Mullins family residence at No. 6 Belgrave Square stood as a physical representation of this status. The four-story home contained approximately 36 rooms and was situated among neighbors drawn from Britain's highest social circles. Members of the aristocracy lived nearby, including Prince George, the fourth child of the king. Within this environment, stability, influence, and expectation were constant features of Elva's early life. As a child, Elva enjoyed the advantages associated with her position. She received an education appropriate to her class, attended society functions, and lacked no material comfort. Her upbringing provided exposure to culture, refinement, and social discipline, all designed to prepare her for a conventional future within elite society. Despite these advantages, contemporaries observed aspects of Elva's temperament that appeared incongruous with her surroundings. Accounts described her as impulsive and emotionally volatile, capable of sudden passions and abrupt reversals of mood. These traits were noted without explanation or diagnosis, presented simply as persistent characteristics. Within the Edwardian and post-war period, women of Elva's class were expected to value discretion, marriage, and restraint. Her documented temperament suggested an early tension between those expectations and her personal inclinations. As Elva approached adulthood, she began to diverge from the conventional path expected of women from aristocratic families. Rather than prioritizing marriage, she expressed a desire for public life and creative recognition. In 1924, at the age of 20, she enrolled at Lady Benson's Drama Academy, studying under the actress Constance Benson, who had achieved prominence on stage and in silent cinema. Elva's training reflected a deliberate effort to pursue performance as a profession. During the theatrical season of 1924 to 1925, she secured a role in The Blue Kitten at the Gaiety Theatre, appearing under the professional name Dolores Ashley. The production enjoyed a successful run, and for a brief period, it appeared that Elva might establish herself within the theatrical world. During this same period, she became engaged to journalist Charles Patrick Graves, who was 6 years her senior. The engagement did not result in marriage. Graves withdrew his proposal, an action that caused Elva visible distress and public embarrassment. Following the dissolution, reports emerged that she appeared at his residence in an agitated state, allegedly carrying a pistol. The historical record does not clearly establish the circumstances of this incident. Soon afterward, both the engagement and her theatrical ambitions collapsed. With professional structure and personal stability gone, Elva entered a transitional period, withdrawing from disciplined pursuits and moving toward a more socially driven existence. In 1927, Elva attended a society function at her parents' residence in Belgrave Square. Among the entertainers hired for the evening was an American vocal trio known as the Three New Yorkers. One member of the group was John Sterling Barney, a tenor of modest accomplishment. An acquaintance formed between them. On the 2nd August 1928, Elva and Barney were married. The union was met with disapproval from Sir John and Lady Mullins, who believed the match inappropriate for their daughter's position. Their concerns soon appeared justified. Within a year, Barney returned to the United States, leaving the marriage legally intact but functionally ended. Elva's circumstances became socially awkward. She was married yet separated, without a household of her own or a professional identity. Her theatrical career had ended, and she held no employment. With little structure in her daily life, she adopted a nocturnal routine, sleeping through the day and spending nights in clubs and at cocktail parties. During this period, her name became associated with a loose group of aristocratic youths known as the Bright Young Things. Their elaborate parties and public excesses attracted press attention. Elva's increasing visibility marked a shift away from purpose and toward dissipation, documented without commentary on motive or intent. In 1931, Elva traveled to Paris, reportedly seeking distance from the scrutiny surrounding her lifestyle in London. During her time there, she met Thomas Michael Scott Stephen, a young man from Putney in southwest London. Scott Stephen expressed ambitions of becoming a fashion designer, though he lacked steady employment or independent financial means. An attachment developed between them. Contemporary accounts do not define the nature of the relationship beyond its intensity. Later that year, Elva returned to London and took up residence at number 21 William Mews in Knightsbridge, a modest but respectable address near her parents' home. The property was initially shared with Henry Melvin Pierce. Shortly before May 1932, Scott Stephen moved into the house. He was described as functioning as a private secretary to Elva, though the exact nature of this role remained undefined. Their domestic arrangement soon attracted attention from neighbors. Residents of the Mews reported frequent late-night quarrels, often loud enough to disturb the street. Complaints were made to the police, though no formal action followed. Some neighbors claimed to hear sounds of struggle, and on occasion, noises resembling gunfire. These reports were documented but never substantiated. The household at William Mews became associated with disorder and tension, as reflected in contemporaneous statements rather than established fact. On the evening of 30th May 1932, Elva Barney and Thomas Michael Scott Stephen hosted a dinner party at their residence in William Mews. The gathering reflected their continued connection to London's social set. Following the meal, several attendees proceeded to the Blue Angel, a private club on Dean Street known for late hours and a bohemian clientele. Elva and Scott Stephen were observed there with some of their guests. In the early hours of 31st May, the couple returned to William Mews. This marked their final confirmed movements together. Shortly before 4 o'clock in the morning, neighbors were awakened by the sound of raised voices coming from number 21. The argument was described as fierce. One resident later recalled hearing a voice shout words resembling, "I will shoot you," though under examination the witness acknowledged uncertainty regarding the precise phrasing. Moments later, a single gunshot echoed through the narrow street. A woman's sobbing was heard, followed by silence. No one witnessed the events inside the house. At approximately 10 minutes before 5, Elva appeared at the door of Dr. Thomas Duran, a nearby physician. She was visibly distressed and repeated that Scott Stephen had wanted to see him to explain that the incident was an accident. Dr. Duran followed her back to William Mews, where he found Scott Stephen dead on the staircase from a gunshot wound to the chest. Dr. Duran confirmed that Thomas Michael Scott Stephen was deceased and notified the authorities. Inspector Campion arrived at number 21 William Mews and began examining the scene. A revolver was found on the floor. Elva Barney, still wearing her evening gown, provided an initial account of events. She stated that she and Scott Stephen had argued after returning home. According to her statement, he threatened to leave her. In distress, she retrieved a revolver from a bedside drawer and threatened to take her own life. A struggle followed as Scott Stephen attempted to disarm her. During that struggle, the gun discharged. She said she could not determine whose finger was on the trigger. Elva was taken to the police station, where she provided a formal statement consistent with her initial account. Sir John and Lady Mullins were notified and secured her temporary release into their custody. A post-mortem examination confirmed that Scott Stephen died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. The trajectory and position of the wound were documented without interpretive conclusion. Dr. Duran later testified regarding Elva's distressed mental state at the scene. The investigation was complicated by evidence handling failures. The revolver had been touched by multiple individuals before fingerprint procedures were applied. When prints were taken, only one usable fingerprint remained, belonging to a detective. Neighbors were interviewed, though their accounts varied in certainty. On 4 June 1932, Inspector Campion formally charged Elva Barney with the willful murder of Thomas Michael Scott Stephen. She was remanded to Holloway Prison to await trial. The trial of Elva Barney opened at the Central Criminal Court on 4 July 1932. Britain was experiencing severe economic hardship, and unemployment exceeded 3 million. Against this backdrop, the case attracted intense public and press attention. Journalists crowded the courtroom, and photographers gathered outside the Old Bailey. Sir Patrick Hastings, former Attorney General, led the defense. From the outset, his strategy focused on portraying Elva as emotionally fragile rather than calculating. He framed her associations and behavior as misfortune rather than malice. The prosecution presented Scott Stephen as the victim of a violent domestic dispute. Dr. Duran testified that Elva's distress appeared genuine, and that, in his opinion, her mental condition at the time made fabrication unlikely. Neighbors were called to recount what they heard during the early hours of 31 May. Under cross-examination, their certainty diminished. One could not confirm whether the phrase heard was, "I will shoot you," or "I will shoot myself," a distinction emphasized by the defense. A police officer testified that Elva struck him and spoke disparagingly during her arrest. The defense argued this behavior was consistent with shock and grief. The revolver became a focal point. Sir Patrick demonstrated that careless handling rendered fingerprint evidence unreliable, eliminating definitive proof of who fired the weapon. Elva testified in her own defense, repeating her account without variation. In his closing address, Hastings argued that the prosecution relied on hearsay and conjecture. No physical evidence demonstrated intent, and no witness could describe the struggle with certainty. The jury retired to deliberate. After deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom. The foreman announced the verdict: not guilty of murder and not guilty of manslaughter. Elva Barney was convicted only of unlawful possession of a firearm, an offense carrying a minor penalty. The verdict prompted audible reactions from the gallery. Elva collapsed into her chair, overcome. Applause briefly broke out before being silenced by court officials. Legally, she was a free woman. Public reaction proved less restrained. Newspapers reported extensively on the outcome and on Elva's conduct following the trial. Accounts emerged of a celebration at the Café de Paris, during which she was alleged to have made remarks claiming responsibility for the shooting. These reports were never formally substantiated, but they circulated widely. Even among those inclined to accept the verdict, her swift return to social life attracted criticism. In an era marked by economic hardship, tolerance for visible excess among the wealthy had diminished. Elva's reputation suffered lasting damage. Her family, having supported her through the trial, grew increasingly distant. Society that once excused scandal now responded with disapproval. Though acquitted in court, Elva faced informal judgment that proved more enduring than any sentence. The legal proceedings ended, but public scrutiny continued, shaping the remainder of her life and limiting the possibility of rehabilitation within the circles she once inhabited. Following the trial, Elva's position within British society deteriorated. Though legally absolved, she remained marked by scandal. Her marriage to John Sterling Barney was formally dissolved in 1933. With social tolerance exhausted, she left England and relocated to Paris, where attitudes toward her past were less severe. For a time, she attempted to rebuild her life. In 1936, she became engaged to a man identified as Monsieur Caddy. The engagement did not result in marriage. Her circumstances remained unstable, marked by intermittent social activity rather than sustained purpose. On Christmas Day 1936, Elva Barney was found dead in her hotel room in Paris. She was 32 years old. The official cause of death was attributed to the combined effects of alcohol and cocaine, following a prolonged night of excess. Authorities did not determine whether her death was accidental or intentional, and the matter remained unresolved. She was buried quietly, away from the public attention that had once followed her every movement. Her family mourned privately. Newspapers that had previously devoted extensive coverage to her trial published only brief notices of her death. Thomas Michael Scott Stephen, whose life ended on the staircase at William Mews, remained largely forgotten. His family had severed ties before his death, and no memorial marked his resting place. His identity persisted primarily in connection with Elva's story. The house at number 21 William Mews still stands, outwardly unchanged from its neighbors. The cobbled street remains quiet, its appearance offering no indication of the events that occurred there in May 1932. Over the decades, Countless residents and visitors have passed through the area, most unaware of its history. Inside the archives of the Central Criminal Court, the case file remains preserved. Depositions, medical reports, and testimony are bound together, documenting the investigation, trial, and verdict. The material records what was said, what was heard, and what could not be proven. Despite extensive examination, certainty was never achieved. No eyewitness observed the shooting. Physical evidence failed to establish intent. Testimony conflicted. The legal process reached its conclusion, yet ambiguity persisted. Elva Barney was acquitted, but doubt endured in public memory. Thomas Michael Scott Stevens' death remained officially categorized without resolution beyond legal definitions. The question that emerged in 1932 was never conclusively answered. Was the shooting the result of a struggle, as Elva maintained, or an intentional act obscured by circumstance and error? The surviving record does not allow a definitive conclusion. What remains are the lives altered and ended, the silence of the Mews, and a case that continues to resist absolute explanation.